Hi, my name is Mackenzie Simons, and I will be doing my psychology presentation over the movie Iron Man 3. And the person I am focusing on, the character that I'm focusing on, is Tony Stark. He is the main character in the movie, of course. He plays Iron Man. He is, about mid 30s or 40s. He's an adult. The psychological disorder that I am covering in the movie is, I'm actually going to cover two. They were post-traumatic stress disorder, also known as PTSD, and generalized anxiety disorder. The symptoms of this disorder that Tony Stark displays throughout the movie are quite prevalent. They're from, one second, let me check the notes. Okay, so for PTSD, there's on the DSM, there are a list of criteria. There's A, B, C, D, E, F, so on. And so for PTSD, criteria 1 is, was the person exposed to a traumatic event? And Tony Stark was, his PTSD comes from the Battle of New York from the Avengers movie. Tony Stark, he underwent a trauma unlike any previous crisis or trauma in his life before. He thought he was going to die. What he went through, it left a lasting emotional impact on him. So, Tony Stark, he has recurring dreams of how he, in the movie, had to fly into a wormhole in space and with this nuclear missile, and he thought he was gonna die. He got up there and he was comfortable with the idea that he was dying alone. It made him very uncomfortable and very sad, but at the same time, that's what he thought was gonna happen. But then he falls out of the wormhole just in time before it gets closed, and the Hulk saves him. That happens all in the Avengers. Iron Man 3 starts out with a view of that, just a little flashback to give you some background of what they're about to cover. In Iron Man 3, then we realize that he wakes up, and it's a recurring nightmare that he has. And throughout the movie, he has the same dream, the same nightmare of what happened to him in the last movie. His first anxiety attack that he suffers, he's in this bar / pub kind of place. It's not really clear. It's just kind of there's bar tables and drink. That's irrelevant. But a couple of children, they walk up to him. They're fans of, Iron Man, and they walk up to him and ask him to sign this drawing that they had. And the drawing was basically, Iron Man saving the day. He had the picture of the wormhole, and he was, flying into it with a big missile on his shoulder, and then all of a sudden Tony Stark becomes very disoriented. He can't concentrate. He's writing his name on the paper, and his hand starts shaking and it messes up his writing. His heart rate gets up really high and he starts freaking out. He doesn't know what's going on or what's happening. So he loses his cool. He gets very irritable. He yells at the kids and runs outside to his Iron Man suit that he had flown there in, and he gets in it and has what he calls Jarvis. It's basically his computer that does everything for him. Basically, it can check his vital signs. It can, any kind of task he gives it, that's how it happens. And so he asks Jarvis to check his vitals and figure out what happened to him, because he thinks he's dying. He thinks he's been poisoned. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just freaking out. And I thought that was very much like how, people in real life, how whenever they have their first anxiety attack or their first battle with anxiety or panic, the first time they experience that, they can't often describe how they feel or explain it, and they don't know what's happening. They just really know that their body is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. Um, but while this is happening, he becomes very tense. He cannot concentrate. Like, he gets into his suit and he can't move. He can't breathe. Like, he's very short of breath. He's just freaking out. So after Jarvis checks his vitals, he explains to him he was not poisoned, he's not dying, and he concludes that he had an anxiety attack or a panic attack. He then, Tony Stark then decides like he has to leave and he goes home. He can't deal with it. He can't be around all these people, so he just flies away. He flies home. Another sign. Where did it go? Okay, so like I said, with criteria A, his traumatic event that he covered, his traumatic event that happened was the Battle of New York and flying into the wormhole with the nuke and thinking he was going to die, even though he faced death boldly. The experience that the experience exerted lasting emotional impact on him. Criteria B for PTSD is persistent re-experiencing, and this is recurrent through the whole movie. He has distressing recollections of the events that he goes through repeatedly. He has these terrible nightmares. His thoughts sometimes jump to that. Just absolute, recurring. It's like happening in his mind all the time. Anytime he goes to sleep, he has trouble sleeping. He gets very tense. He has flashback episodes a lot. Okay, sorry. Okay, criteria C for PTSD. Okay, so what it is persistent avoidance. They want to, like whoever's suffering from it, in this case, Tony Stark, he wants to avoid anything that revolves around the situation, from talking about it to doing anything that makes him think about it to, having intimate relationships with people who were involved in it. This whole time, he's excluded to himself. His girlfriend slash fiance, whatever she is, her name's Pepper. He becomes very disengaged from her, and he's running her company, and he becomes very disengaged from her. He starts to feel like he doesn't really have he's not gonna live for a long time. At one point, he even gets to the point of giving out his address to the press, the world, and the main antagonist in the movie. And he nearly gets everyone killed in that battle. But, where was I? Oh, yes. Persistent avoidance. So, what happens is anytime anybody would bring this up, he, avoids it at all costs. And one of his ways of avoiding it was he had this hobby, which was basically just a distraction, that to keep him busy and avoid any stimuli that would remind him of the Battle of New York or anything that happened. And what he did to distract himself was he built a ton of Iron Man suits throughout the movie. And the cool thing about this movie was throughout the movie we see that he's had these symptoms for months and months, and but as the movie progresses throughout, we see him trying to get over these symptoms, and he's, trying to figure out something to help. And by the end of the movie, when it comes down to the final battle with the bad guy, it's, he destroys all of his suits, and that's what he was hung up on. That is what he was stuck on through the whole movie, was building these suits. He had like 72 of them. And so he destroys them all to beat the bad guy and get his girlfriend back safe. And then he goes and has surgery to have the shrapnel removed from his heart that was killing him. Excuse me. But persistent avoidance. Tony another part of the movie was he's in another country and he has this kid helping him out, trying to figure out who the Mandarin is, and that's like the terrorist bad guy kind of thing in the movie, which ends up being this total twist, but that's unrelated. But he has this kid helping him, and the kid starts asking him about the Battle of New York, and he starts losing. He's like, "Oh, you're gonna freak me out, man. You're gonna freak me out." And so the kid has a slight understanding of anxiety. It's not like told to us from where, but he has an understanding of it, and he follows him and like helps him get out of it, talks him out of it, like, you're Tony Stark. I don't care if you're having an anxiety attack. You gotta get up and you gotta, we got stuff to do. Helps him through that. He has a couple of those with that kid. PTSD criteria D. That is persistent symptoms of increased arousal. So his severe insomnia where he can't sleep, and his recurrent anxiety attacks, that's what he calls them. They're not really sure if they're anxiety attacks or panic attacks, but they kind of fit anxiety the most. He can't sleep, like, at all. He has terrible sleeping problems, terrible insomnia. He has these horrible dreams all the time. He has anxiety attacks all the time. PTSD criteria E is the duration of the disturbance over a month. So, but his problems actually happen for months. It just is continuous through month after month after month. PTSD criteria F is clinically significant impairment or distress. We'll cut out F. Okay, so in Iron Man 3, Tony Stark appears to meet the full criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. He either, throughout the movie he kind of denies it, he doesn't want to admit it, he's kind of in denial about it. He's refusing to recognize his own problem, which is a common occurrence among people who actually suffer from PTSD. His anxiety, or panic, it could be either one, really. They're reoccurring. He has a lot of these symptoms. I think I covered. So for all of my research for this, I use the DSM-IV-TR. to do, like, to get all the symptoms from it, and, I have some experience with these, so I had a general understanding before I came into it. That's why I chose this movie. Yeah. I think this movie accurately, as much as a movie can, depicts how it would be to have PTSD and anxiety, and how it would be how it affects you, or the person who's suffering it, and those around them. Um, in it shows his struggle with trying to explain what's going on. It shows his denial of it. It shows how he just wants to, he wants to get better, but at the same time, he struggles with it. It shows in the movie how it affects Pepper and all of his other teammates, and the people who are around him and his life, and how it affects his work, and just um, his like interaction with others in general. Okay, so some of the contributing factors to his disorder, of course, were physical trauma. Suffered a lot during the Battle of New York, like I've mentioned. Psychological trauma. He, uh, like I said before, he suffered a lot emotionally, mentally, after his near-death experience. It really, really messed him up. Um, Stress played a lot of role. It played a big role in it. He, he had this huge company to run. He's trying to save people at the same time trying to save himself, trying to figure out how to fix his heart, how to, you know, cope with what's going on with him inside his head and with his body. So at the end of the movie, Tony doesn't really access treatment per se for his PTSD and anxiety. He more covers he learns how to deal with it and he gets over it. But he doesn't really, get clinical help. But he does go to the doctor for what he's been putting off for a long time. He goes to the doctor and has the surgery done to remove all of the stuff that's surrounding his heart that was adding extra stress to him about how it could kill him. Uh, my overall reaction to the movie and how mental illness was portrayed, I personally think that the movie it portrayed it well. I think it portrayed it well. There were certain aspects that could be different, but for a movie and for someone playing it who doesn't actually suffer from those things in real life, I think it was illustrated well, it was written well. Um, Overall, the movie was, it wasn't as good as some of the other superhero movies, but for the purpose that I was watching it for, it covered the basis really well. It did its job. I think that this movie really gives an insight to others about, how others could, like, around them could feel whenever they're going through. It gives them more of an understanding of what's going on whenever someone's having an anxiety attack, or someone with PTSD, why they feel the way they do, what's going on in their head whenever